when we think about philosophy, we tend to think about the great literary works like the Enchiridion or Meditations, or whatever. All of these masterful works of literary genius, and as such, for maybe the vast majority of people, that makes it seem like the subject of philosophy is a little bit out of reach. It is the pursuit of the academics and the intellectuals and so on, but that's not true. So philosophy at its core is an expression of who and what we are as human beings, and as such, everybody has a philosophy, everybody engages in philosophy. Every work of art that you have ever encountered is a reflection or an exploration in some way of philosophy. So one of the schools of philosophical schools of thought that exist in the world is Stoicism, and Stoicism seems to be gaining a fair amount of popularity in recent years. Stoicism has been around for a very, very long time as a concept, and you can go all the way back to ancient Greece, to people like Epictetus. You can go to Rome, to Marcus Aurelius, and so on. But when you look to modern media, I'm going to use science fiction because I'm a giant nerd. I'm going to use science fiction as my example. So when you think about Stoicism, there are portrayals of Stoicism in the media that we've all encountered. And one of many, is in Star Trek. It's Mr. Spock. Now, Spock, for those who don't know, it is a half human, half Vulcan. And the Vulcans within Star Trek are beings that suppress their emotions and exist in a state of pure logic. And they view the humans as being overly emotional, being slaves to their emotion, essentially. And then you have Mr. Spock, who is in the middle of both worlds. He's not emotional enough to be human, but he's too emotional to be Vulcan. Now, the character of Mr. Spock is a good example of a common misconception about Stoicism. Because people often think, when they think about Stoicism, about people being cold and disconnected, and that's not the case. So the ideas, or one of the central ideas of Stoicism, is that you have things within your sphere of control. So those are all the things that you can directly influence and control. And then you have, outside of your sphere of control, you have basically everything else, which is the things that you can only indirectly influence and control, and further afield, things that you have no influence over and no control over. And that whole idea is essentially a toolkit that allows you as an individual to look at a situation and figure out which aspects of it are within your sphere of control, which by proxy means those are the things that you need to focus on, and those are the things that you need to expend physical, mental and emotional energy on. And everything else, well, you let the cards fall as they may. So within the context of Star Trek, and more specifically Mr. Spock, Mr. Spock is, on the one hand, he's aware of all the things that are within his sphere of control and what falls outside of that. But the portrayal that Spock gives is really quite, at times at least, really quite cold, quite devoid of emotion passion and so on. Almost indifferent, essentially. And as I say, that's not an accurate representation of Stoicism. But it does give an inkling of an insight into Stoicism, but more how it can be viewed from the outside. But Stoicism really isn't about suppressing your emotions. It's not about being cold and disconnected. It is about experiencing the full range of emotions and allowing yourself the peace and the space required to experience that full range of emotions without having the waters muddied by external influences. And the recognition of what is in your sphere of control and what isn't provides you with a reprieve from the emotional cost of focusing on the wrong things, i.e. the things that are outside of your sphere of control. So that is, in a nutshell, that is Stoicism. So you can do that with any school of philosophical thought. You can find a character, a story, whatever, a work of art, whatever, that exemplifies the core tenets of that philosophy. Now, I obviously used Mr. Spock, partly because he's so well known, and partly because of the misconception of Stoicism that is woven so heavily into the character. And there was a reason for that. I mean, there was a reason that was my choice and such, as an example, because it gives an insight into how it appears from the outside. But it doesn't give such a good insight onto, the actual mechanics of what's going on inside. So you do have to look further afield for that. But analysing the character offers you an opportunity, a starting point to delve into the principles of Stoicism and how you can apply that to your life. Through exploring the character, you see the pitfalls of the philosophy and the positives of it. And you also see, like I did with Mr. Spock, okay, I don't think that's quite an accurate representation of that philosophy, because, and then that gives you the point at which you can look deeper, that further point of exploration. But when you want to explore a field of philosophical thought, look to art, look to media, and so on, and see those portrayals, analyze them, pick them apart, see what works and what doesn't. Because philosophy is an expression of us, of our species, of maybe even of sentience and consciousness in general. So using what's available to you right now, what exists in the world right now, and is actually what's relevant to you right now, is a really good way to start that process. Because if you start by reading the Enchiridion or the Meditations or whatever, those are wonderful things to read, really, really interesting and insightful, but they are quite difficult to read and relate to, because they are a product of another time, and they're quite formal in nature. And on top of that, they are the end result of that philosophy. So it's that interpretation of that philosophy. Whereas when you use art, media and stuff, or even, people in your life as as a starting point for that exploration instead of those great works, you get to see it in action. You get to see a real life version of it, rather than this sort of idealized version that's formalized and written down. So that's a great way into it, especially for people that don't want to spend hundreds of hours reading books that are quite difficult to read. And I don't mean that in the sense like I doubt your ability to read or think you're stupid or anything like that. So please don't take it that way. What I mean is the actual chronological distance between you and when that thing was written means that you have to do a hell of a lot of projecting of those ideas to make them relevant, to make them useful, essentially. And that's quite difficult. And I would say that for the vast majority of people, it's also unnecessary, because it's a lot of work to gain not a lot of momentum. So if you look at the great works that are around us now, of modern times, it's much more relevant to who you are right now. You have those, you view those experiences, those expressions, and you are immediately able to put yourself within that experience and that expression. There isn't there isn't a massive amount of abstraction required to assimilate that information and understand those ideas and to use them to further your own ideas. So if you are interested in a particular philosophy, that would be I think a really good starting point. You get to see those philosophies in action. You get to see those people, those stories, those ideas being played out. And then when you go back and read things like the Meditations and the Enchiridion and such, they make a lot more sense. It's a much more enjoyable read because you already have the prerequisite information, understanding and experience. So that you can read those things and that massive amount of abstraction is no longer required because that work's already done, and it's done sort of unconsciously as well. So it's an excellent way of closing the gap between those ideas and where you exist right now. So tell me what you think. Is there value in modern media when it comes to exploring philosophical ideas? And regardless of the particular flavour of philosophy that you're exploring, which characters do you find, or stories or artworks or whatever, do you find that you relate to and that have offered you insight into your own life? I would love to know, because those are the things that in the world of philosophy, those are the things that really matter. What benefit, what impact does it have on your life? How can it improve your existence? So that's something I think everybody should think about. I don't believe that everybody needs to spend as much time studying these things as I do. I do, after all, do this stuff for a living, but I do believe that these are important things for everybody to explore in their own way, in their own time, and at their own pace. So yeah, which characters, which stories, which works of art have spoken to you in a profound way in your lifetime? And what have you learned from that? And can you identify which philosophy most aligns with those ideas? Jump in the comments and let me know.